The man with the bread dust rolled across the broken streets of Targon 7. It was a forgotten mining colony, left to rot after the last ore veins dried up. Now, only the poorest of the alien species remained. Most were children, thin, hungry, dirty, and too scared to speak. Humans didn't come here. No traders, no soldiers, no diplomats. Only one had arrived. A man with tired eyes, a patched jacket, and a strange bag slung over his shoulder. He walked slowly through the ruined market square. Alien eyes watched him from behind crates and broken stalls. Children, tiny, hungry, alien children. Most had never seen a human in real life. The man stopped in the center of the square. He didn't speak, he just knelt, opened his bag, and started pulling out food. Warm, soft bread, chunks of dried meat, packets of sweet fruit paste. He placed them gently on the dusty stone, then stood and stepped back. No words, no demands, just food. The alien children didn't move at first. They were used to traps, cruel jokes, pain. But one girl stepped forward. Her skin was pale blue, her ribs showing. She crawled, not walked, her legs too weak from hunger. She grabbed a piece of bread and clutched it like treasure. The others followed. Dozens of children rushed forward, some crying, some too stunned to blink. They ate with trembling hands, stuffing the food into their mouths like they feared it would vanish. The human just watched. He didn't smile, didn't speak. He just sat on a broken pillar nearby, waiting. That's when she appeared. A tall alien woman in rough armor, strapped with old weapons, eyes sharp like a beast's. She was a warrior. Everyone feared her, especially the children. She stormed across the square, claws out, tail raised. "What do you think you're doing, human?" She growled. Her voice cut the air like a blade. The human didn't flinch. He looked at her calmly and said one thing. They were hungry. She snarled, ready to strike. But the children stood between her and the man, even the smallest ones. Even the ones too weak to stand properly. They formed a wall, their tiny bodies shaking. But refusing to move, the warrior blinked. She looked at their face, silty, teary, scared, but also loyal to him, the human. She lowered her weapon slowly, her gaze locked with his. "You fed them first," she said quietly. "No one does that here." The human nodded. "I didn't come to take anything," he said, "just wanted to give something back." She didn't answer. Instead, she turned around and vanished into the shadows. But the next day, she came back. She brought bandages, clean water, and a half-broken heater for the children. She never explained why, and she didn't speak much to the human either. But every time he showed up with food, she stood nearby, watching, protecting. Something had changed, not just in her, but in the whole settlement. And it all began because one human chose to feed the alien kids first, and now, even the fiercest warrior girl followed him. The warrior girl watches the next morning. The sun rose red over Targon 7. Ash floated in the sky, and the wind smelled like rust and old smoke. Most days were the same here, cold, quiet, hopeless, but today was different. The children were gathered early. They waited near the broken fountain, eyes wide, stomachs growling. Their little feet tapped on the cracked ground as they looked in every direction. They were waiting for the human. He had fed them yesterday, and in their world, kindness was rare, almost unheard of. And then he came, just like before, walking slowly with that same patched jacket and heavy bag. No armor, no weapons, just food. He sat on the same stone block, opened his bag, laid out bread, dried meat, even a bottle of clean water. The children didn't wait this time. They rushed forward like a wave, laughing, giggling, hungry but happy, and she was there again, the warrior girl, hiding in the shadows, arms crossed, armor dusty and scarred, her tail flicked slowly behind her, eyes sharp like a hawk's. She wasn't just watching the children. She was watching him, the human. No one knew her name. Only that she had once been part of a war clan. She had led raids, fought beasts, survived poison storms. Now she stood silent behind rusted metal walls. But when he gave his food away, something inside her stirred. Why? Why was this man doing this? What did he want? The others had come before, smugglers, thieves, slavers, all pretending to be kind. But this one never asked for anything, not once. She stepped forward slowly. The children noticed and moved away from her path. Even the bold ones feared her. But the human didn't flinch. He just nodded toward the food. "There's enough," he said. Gently, she stared at him, not moving. Her stomach growled quietly, but she ignored it. "What is your name?" she asked, her voice low, suspicious. "Darren," he said. "And yours?" She didn't answer. She just sat down on a nearby crate, still watching, still silent. The children finished eating and sat around Darren. Some leaned against his legs. Others played with the empty food wrappers. They laughed, their thin faces glowing with rare smiles. Darren pulled out a small device from his jacket. It made a soft humming noise, then projected a tiny light image. "A spinning globe, glowing blue earth," he said. "My home." The kids stared at it in awe. They had never seen such a thing. One small boy reached out and touched the glowing ball, then giggled. The warrior girl's eyes softened for a moment. Only a moment. Then her voice cut the silence. "You're a soldier?" "No," Darren replied. "Just a mechanic." "Why are you here?" "I crash-landed near the edge of the wastelands," he said. "I fixed my ship. But then I saw this place, and you decided to feed strangers," she asked, narrowing her eyes. Darren looked at the kids. "They remind me of someone I lost," he said, quietly. "A daughter." He nodded slowly, not saying another word. She didn't press him. She just sat there, watching again. But this time her tail didn't flick with anger, and when he packed up to leave, she walked beside him. The children waved goodbye. "Come back tomorrow." One shouted, "Bring more of those sweet paste things." Another laughed. Darren smiled and waved back as he and the warrior girl disappeared down the alley. A few of the children whispered, "She didn't scare him. She walked with him. Is she his guard now?" That night, in the broken shelter where Darren slept, the warrior girl stood outside, not saying a word, just watching the stars. She didn't trust him, not fully, but something about him felt honest, strange, but true, and deep down, a thought formed in her mind. If he could feed their children without fear, then maybe he was worth following. Her name was lost. The next morning came with a sharp, cold wind. Targon 7 never had gentle mornings. Even the sky looked cracked like a mirror that had been dropped long ago. Darren was already awake. He had just finished fixing a broken solar panel near his shelter when he heard soft footsteps. He turned around slowly, expecting maybe a child, but it was her, the warrior girl. She stood with her arms crossed, eyes scanning his tools. She didn't speak. Not yet. She was always quiet at first, like she was still deciding if he was real or a trick from her past. "You're early," Darren said, brushing dust off his hands. "You didn't feed yourself," she replied, her voice sharp. "I'm used to it," he shrugged. "You feed them?" "But not you," she said again, this time with a colder tone. "That's not strength. That's foolish." Darren looked at her and smiled softly. "Maybe," he said. "But I'd rather see them full than me." She didn't argue, but her tail twitched. Something in his words got under her skin that annoyed her. "You used to be a leader," he said suddenly, surprising her. "Didn't you?" Her eyes narrowed. "I was something once," she replied. "Now I am only what is left." There was silence for a while. Then Darren asked gently, "What's your name?" She paused. No one had asked her that in years. not since her last squad was slaughtered, not since she crawled out of the smoke with broken armor and bleeding pride. Zura, she finally whispered. Then she frowned, like she regretted saying it. Darren nodded. It's a strong name. Zura turned away quickly. Don't use it, she said. Not yet. Later that day, they returned together to the square. The children were already waiting. Their eyes lit up when they saw Darren. Some even ran to hug him, but this time they didn't run from Zora. They looked at her, paused, then offered tiny smiles. She didn't smile back, but she also didn't growl. And that was enough for them. One small girl with orange skin and shaky knees walked up to Zura and handed her a flower. It wasn't really a flower, just a crushed weed tied with string, but Zora stared at it as if it were something priceless. Why? She asked the child, confused. Because you protect him? The girl said, pointing at Darren. He protects us, and you protect him. Zura looked at Darren, who just gave her a simple nod. It was the first gift she had received since the war. They sat together near the food pile as the kids ate. Zora's armor clicked gently when she moved. Darren passed her a protein bar. She hesitated, then took it. You were a soldier, he said, not asking, just knowing. Yes, she replied. I was born into a warrior caste. I thought your kind was proud of strength. We are, she said, but strength didn't save my people. She looked far into the distance. My last mission, we were told to defend a temple sacred to our ancestors. Did you win? No, she said bitterly. We were betrayed, left to die. Darren didn't ask more. He just sat beside her. The silence between them, not awkward, but healing. Then something strange happened. A large alien male appeared from the shadows. He was tall, built like stone, and wore the same bone markings Zura used to have. A clan warrior, but one who still believed in power and control. He stomped into the square, shouting, "What is this?" He roared, "Why are our young bowing to a human?" The children scattered in fear. Zora stood quickly, stepping in front of Darren. Her hand went to the blade on her hip, but Darren stood too, placing a hand on her arm. Wait, he said, calm but firm. The warrior glared at Darren. You have made them weak, he growled, feeding them like pets. They're not pets, Darren replied. They're kids. The man raised his voice again. I will take control of this place, and I will start with you. He pointed. At Darren, Zora moved like lightning. One moment, she was beside Darren. The next, she had her blade at the warrior's throat. I follow him now, she said. Voice like iron. Touch him. I'll break your spine. The male froze, shocked. She wasn't bluffing. Everyone in the square could feel it. She wasn't just protecting Darren. She had chosen her side. For a long second, no one moved. Then the male growled low and backed away. He vanished into the ruins, muttering curses. Darren looked at Zura. She didn't speak, but she kept her blade drawn for a while longer, just in case, from that day on. No one dared challenge the human, because now he had something even more dangerous than kindness. He had a warrior girl who believed in him. The day she smiled, the air was heavy the next morning. A storm brewed far beyond the broken mountains, and the sky turned the color of old steel. But inside the old market square, something rare was happening. The children were laughing. They ran, barefoot through the dust, chasing each other, waving sticks. They played games no adult understood, making sounds only children could make. And in the middle of it all, Darren sat on a broken cart, smiling to himself. He had no great plan, no mission. He had only brought food again, and the children had brought joy. Zura stood nearby, arms folded, back straight. Her armor rattled as she shifted slightly. Watching everything, she didn't laugh. She didn't speak, but her eyes were softer than before. One of the youngest kids, a small boy with green skin and droopy ears, ran up to her. He held out a piece of dried meat already half chewed. For you, he said, proudly. Zura blinked. Unsure what to do. She didn't want to take it, didn't want to accept something so dirty, but the boy was smiling so hard his face shook. So she took it, held it in her gloved hand, and nodded once. "Thank you," she said, her voice quiet. The boy ran back to the others, laughing. Zora turned slightly so no one could see her face, but Darren saw it. A small smile, almost nothing, but it was real. Later that day, Darren worked on repairing an old water purifier. It sat broken near the edge of the square. Rusted, forgotten, he had pulled it apart with care, cleaning the filters, replacing wires. Zura watched for a while, then finally asked, "Why fix that?" "Because they need clean water," he answered, wiping sweat from his brow. "There's a well 2 blocks down," she said. "Full of worms," he replied, "and sickness." She didn't argue, but after a moment, she crouched beside him. "Show me," she said. He handed her a small wrench, and for the first time, they worked side by side. She had strong hands, fast fingers. She didn't know much about machines. But she learned quickly, and Darren didn't talk too much. He just explained when needed and let her do the rest. Hours passed like minutes. The sky grew darker, and thunder rumbled in the distance. But before the storm arrived, the purifier clicked, hummed, then lit up. A clean, steady stream of water trickled out. The kids clapped. Some screamed in delight. They rushed forward, drinking with cupped hands. Splashing their faces, one girl started dancing in circles. Spinning with joy, Zura stood, wiping grease from her fingers. She looked down at Darren, who was still on one knee beside the machine. "You did this?" she said. "No," he said. Glancing at her, "We did this for the first time." She didn't correct him. Then the storm hit. Wind howled through the square, blowing dust into their eyes. The kids screamed not in fear, but in excitement. Rain poured from the sky, thick and cold, washing over them. They danced, they laughed, they were alive. Zora stepped under the shelter of a broken awning. She shook her head at the chaos, but then she saw Darren, standing in the middle of the storm, arms out, face tilted upward, letting the rain wash him clean. The kids pulled him down, forced him to join their game, and he did. He spun, he splashed, he laughed with them, and something in Zora cracked. Not loudly, not painfully, just gently. A memory returned. Her younger siblings, long dead, playing in the monsoon rains of her home world, laughing like these kids, free, wild, innocent. She stepped into the rain, slowly at first. The kids stopped and stared, unsure if they were in trouble. But then one bold boy tossed a piece of soaked bread at her. It hit her shoulder and stuck there, soggy and sad. She blinked, looked down at it, and then she laughed. Not a loud laugh, not a warrior's roar, but a real, light laugh. The children gasped, then cheered. Zura bent down and scooped a handful of muddy water and tossed it at Darren. He ducked and threw back. The rain fell harder, but no one cared, not in that moment, because that was the day. The warrior girl smiled, and the kids would never forget it. Not ever. Even in the ruins, even under gray skies, there was laughter now. And it all started with food, but it had become something more. Family. The raiders came for him days past. The broken square began to feel like a real place again. The kids were no longer just surviving. They were laughing, learning, and living. Zura had even helped build a roof over Darren's shelter using metal, sheets, and salvaged panels every morning. Darren brought food. Every evening, Zura sat with the children, sharpening her blade but no longer silent. The kids had given her a nickname, now Storm Lady, and she didn't correct them. But peace never stayed long on Targon 7. It happened on the 7th day. Just as the children were finishing their morning meal, a sound filled the air. Low engines. Fast and angry, Zura's eyes snapped to the horizon. 3 raider bikes tore through the ruins, kicking up dust. They weren't here by mistake. They came straight for the square. The children screamed and ran to hide. Darren stood quickly, pulling the youngest behind the old water purifier. Zura was already in motion, armor on, blade drawn, eyes blazing. The lead raider jumped off his bike before it even stopped. He was a tall alien male, face tattooed, wearing scavenged gear. 2 more followed, one holding a shock whip, the other a blaster. Where is the human? The leader growled. Zora stepped between him and the food crates, her voice like thunder. "Leave!" The raider laughed. "We heard a human was giving food away." Acting like a saint, he spat in the dirt. "We want his ship, his supplies." And if he resists his bones, Zora's blade glinted in the sunlight. "You'll leave with broken teeth if you take 1 step closer." The second raider raised his blaster, but before he could aim, a rock slammed into his head. A child had thrown it, a tiny one barely big enough to walk, and now she stood, shaking, tears in her eyes, but brave. The raiders growled. "That's it," the leader shouted. "Take the human and burn the rest." Zora didn't wait. She moved like lightning, her blade flashing. She slashed the blaster out of one raider's hand and kicked him into a pile of crates. Darren grabbed a broken metal pipe and swung it into another's leg, making him fall, but it wasn't enough. The leader tackled Darren hard, slamming him. Into the dirt, he raised a knife ready to stab. The children screamed, Zura roared. She launched herself across the square. Her blade sliced the air, and in one powerful strike, she knocked the raider back, saving Darren just in time. But the fight wasn't over. The 3 raiders regrouped, circling, now wary. Zora stood protectively in front of Darren, bleeding from her arm. "You don't understand," the leader hissed. "The city wants him dead. He's a threat to order, feeding the hungry, giving them hope it spreads." Darren coughed, holding his ribs. "I'm just one man." He said, "Exactly," the raider growled. "And that's what makes it dangerous." Zura narrowed her eyes. "You fear one man who gives food to children? We fear what comes next," he said. If others follow him, Zura didn't hesitate. She leaped forward. Faster than their eyes could track, the fight became a blur, metal clashing, bone breaking, feet slamming into dirt. She fought like she had nothing to lose, because now, for the first time in years, she had something to protect. Darren and the kids. In minutes, the raiders lay broken and moaning in the dust. Zura stood over them, panting, blood dripping from her blade. She looked at the children, all gathered behind Darren, wide-eyed, terrified. Then she turned to the leader. "Go," she said. "Tell them the human stays. Tell them the Storm Lady watches." The raider crawled to his bike. Dragging his comrades with him, he didn't look back. No one ever challenged Zura twice. When the noise faded, Darren sat down slowly. Wincing from his ribs, the kids ran to him, hugging him tight. One tried to wipe the dirt from his cheek. Another handed him a half-eaten bread roll, as if that would fix the pain. Zura stood over him, breathing hard. "You're hurt," she said, frowning. "I'll live," he replied with a crooked smile. "You should run," she said quietly. "They'll send more." Darren looked at the children, clinging to his arms, then at Zura, and he shook his head. "If I run, who feeds them?" Zura didn't answer, but her heart ached. He wasn't just feeding the children. He was feeding something long lost in her to honor, loyalty, purpose. She knelt beside him, then reached into her belt and handed him a small device. "What's this?" he asked. "A signal beacon," she said. "If we ever need help, it will call every warrior I know who still breathes." He looked at her, eyes serious. "You still have allies?" "Not many," she said, "but the ones I have owe me their lives." That night, as the stars returned to the sky, the children slept safely in old shelters. Darren lay on a mat, ribs aching, and Zura stood guard again, this time with purpose. In her eyes, because now they were more than just survivors. They were a unit, and the Storm Lady had finally chosen her commander. The whisper that spread the news spread like wind across the wastelands of Targon 7, not through radios, not through official channels, but through whispers. Whispers carried by scavengers, orphans, wandering healers, and even broken old soldiers. They say a human is feeding the forgotten. They say he stood against raiders and lived. They say the Storm Lady follows him. At first, no one believed it. But then more began to arrive, not in large numbers, just one or two at a time. An injured elder carried on a cart, a young mother with her child wrapped in cloth, a former miner missing 3 fingers, a blind warrior leaning on a metal staff. They came with empty hands, but hopeful eyes. And every time Darren saw one of them, he made space. He offered a seat, a bite of food, a sip of water. No questions. No judgment. Zura didn't trust them all at first. She circled the square like a hawk, eyes always scanning for traps. But even she could see it. These were not threats. They were broken pieces, like her. One night, the children sang. They had no instruments, just voices, claps, and laughter. Darren sat beside the fire. Zura beside him, her blade still rested on her lap, but she hadn't drawn it in days. "I don't understand this," Zora said softly. "I fought in 10 battles, survived poison lands, even led assassins once. But this piece is harder to handle." Darren chuckled, poking the fire with a stick. "Because war gives orders," he said. "Peace gives choices." She looked at him for a long moment, then nodded. "You are strange human," she said. "But I no longer think you are weak." The next day, something strange happened. A group of teenage warriors, 5 of them, appeared at the edge of the square. They wore mixed armor, no clan symbols, and they had hard eyes. Zura stepped in front of them, her body tense. "What do you want?" she asked. "We heard stories." The leader, a young female with scarred cheeks, said, "About a human who feeds the forgotten, and a warrior who protects him." Zura didn't lower her blade, and were tired of taking orders from those who let the weak starve. The girl said, "We want to fight for something real. Can we?" "Stay." Zora stared at them, reading their posture. They were ready to be rejected, ready to be attacked. Instead, Zora turned and looked at Darren. He gave a small nod. Zora turned back to them. "You stay. You protect the children first," she said firmly. "They eat before you, they rest before you. You fight only if you must, and never against those who carry nothing but hunger." The teens nodded. And just like that, Zora had followers of her own. By the end of the week, the square was full. Not crowded, but alive. A small community formed, built on bread, warmth, and protection. Darren fixed broken lights. Zura trained the teenagers in discipline and restraint, and the children kept everyone sane. One evening, a visitor came, a woman old, tall, with metal woven into her skin. Her eyes glowed red with scanning implants, and her voice was deep. "You are the human?" she asked, standing at the edge of the firelight. Darren stood slowly. "Yes," he said. "And you are?" "I was once a Queen's engineer," she said. "Now I repair cooking pots and broken hearts." Darren smiled. "Well, we've got both here." The woman looked around at the children, the fire, the safety, then looked at Zura. "You were feared once," she said. "I still am." Zura replied calmly. "No," the woman said, smiling for the first time now. "You are respected." That night, Zira sat alone on the rooftop, watching the stars. Darren climbed up and sat beside her, 2 cups of warm tea in hand. "You never ask me what I want," Zora said. "I don't need to," he replied, handing her the tea. "You stay." That means more than words. She took the tea, sipped quietly, then asked softly, "What happens when we run out of food?" Darren looked at the firelight below. "We plant seeds," he said. "There's still soil, still light. We grow it ourselves." Zura nodded for the first time. She believed him. The warrior who once only knew destruction now helped build. The human who came with nothing now had many who followed. But far beyond the wastelands, eyes were watching. Those in power were not pleased. They saw what was growing here, and they feared it because one man had fed the hungry, and now even warriors were choosing hope over fear. The ones who stewed the sun didn't rise that morning, not because it was gone, but because smoke had filled the sky. Zura smelled it first. She stood from the rooftop just before dawn. Armor already strapped on. Darren was still sleeping beside. The fire pit children curled up around him like puppies. Then came the rumble. Not from raiders, not from scavengers, but from machines, a hovercraft. Large and marked with the symbol of the core authority. Appeared from the north, it wasn't here to trade, it wasn't here to talk. It was here to crush hope. Zura jumped down and woke Darren fast. The children stirred with confusion and fear. The new teenage warriors grabbed makeshift weapons and shields made from scrap metal. "They're here," Zura said. Darren didn't ask who, he already knew. They had come not for revenge, but to remind the forgotten that they were still forgotten. To remind the people that kindness could not grow in lawless places. But they were wrong. The hovercraft landed with a sharp hiss. Doors opened, and soldiers marched out, real soldiers, armored and armed, 15 of them with rifles, shock staffs, and tear gas grenades. The officer leading them stepped forward, helmet off, pale eyes like frost. "Who's in charge here?" he barked. Zura stepped forward. She didn't blink, she didn't bow. "I am," she said, "and she pointed to Darren, "is the heart of this place." The officer raised his chin. "Then you're both under arrest for spreading rebellion, attracting armed deserters, and operating without permission from planetary control." The children gasped. One clung to Darren's arm. Zura's fingers curled around her sword hilt. "I suggest you surrender peacefully," the officer said. "Or we take the children too." That was his mistake. The crowd that had formed the elders, the young mothers, the teenagers Zura trained suddenly stepped forward. Dozens of them. None wore armor. Most didn't even have weapons, but they stood shoulder to shoulder, and Zura stepped forward slowly. Her blade resting on her shoulder. "No one touches the children," she said, voice calm but dangerous. "And no one takes him," she added, nodding at Darren. The officer laughed. "You think your scrap weapons and old war stories can stop?" Trained troops. A deep voice from the back answered him. Yes, an old warrior, half his body replaced with metal. Limped into view, behind him were more survivors of past wars, broken ex-soldiers, and quiet fighters who had once hidden in shame. They weren't hiding anymore. "You forgot something," the old warrior said to the officer. "When you throw away the broken pieces, sometimes they come together." The officer hesitated. His soldiers looked unsure. Then Darren stepped forward, no weapon in hand. Just a small child clinging to his leg. He looked the officer in the eyes and said calmly, "You think this is a rebellion? It's not. It's a garden. And you're here to burn it because you don't understand it." The officer raised his hand. His troops stepped forward, weapons humming. It was about to begin violence, death, another broken place added to the list, until a sound stopped. Everything, a sharp beep, then a signal flare shot into the sky from behind the shelters. Glowing red and loud, Zura had activated the beacon. A moment passed, then another, then roars. From above, behind, all around, warrior clans, long thought extinct, came marching through the ruins. Not hundreds, but enough. Their armor didn't shine, their weapons weren't new, but their eyes burned with purpose. These were the warriors Zora once bled with, and they had answered her call. The officer stepped back in fear. His soldiers froze, surrounded now, outnumbered, one child in. The crowd raised a stick and shouted, "You can't scare us anymore." And the crowd roared. In that moment, the soldiers lowered their weapons. The officer, sweating, signaled retreat, and the hovercraft rose into the sky, fading into the clouds. The people cheered, some cried, some dropped to their knees, hugging their children. Darren stood silently, his eyes damp. Zora walked to him, her armor scratched and dusty. She looked at him and nodded. "They will come again," she said. "I know." Darren replied, "But next time, we'll be ready." That night, under the stars, the fire burned bright. The children sang again, louder than before. The warriors sat beside them, sharing stories, eating together. Zora looked around at the faces laughing, tired, full, alive, and she whispered to Darren, "Do you know what you've done?" He looked at her, confused. "What?" "You didn't just feed them," she said. "You woke them up. You made them remember they matter." And for the first time since the wars, Zora smiled without hiding it, because the man who gave his bread away had given something far greater than food. He had given them back their future.